Hello, welcome to Gospel Share Missions, 4 Fields Discipleship Multiplication Training. In the last video we shared Lesson 1, the training outline, characteristics of church multiplication movements. Now this is Lesson number 2, Big Vision, it's global. From Genesis to Revelation, God reveals that He wants to save all nations. A church that grows and multiplies moves within God's big global vision. In your training, ask your participants to locate page 4 in the Notes and Drawings document. Begin by teaching the passages above. As you teach, ask your participants to write in the blank spaces. In Genesis chapter 1, from 26 to 28, we see that mankind was made in God's image. Tell them to write the word, image. In Genesis chapter 3, we see that God's image was corrupted in mankind because of the sin of disobedience. Write down the word, corrupted. In Genesis chapter 6, verse 1 and 5, we see that in Noah's days wickedness and sin multiplied, and for this reason God announced His judgment, the flood. Write down, judgment. We always see that where there is wickedness, there's a sin, and where there is sin, there is judgment, and where there is judgment there is always grace. And we see God's grace in Genesis chapter 9, verse 1 and 8, after the flood, there is a new beginning restored. Write down, beginning. It seems that everything was resolved. However, in Genesis chapter 11, verse 4, we see in the Tower of Babel that mankind, seeking their own name and glory, rebelled against God again. Write down, rebelled. It seems that mankind has a tendency to rebel against God and move away from God's plan and His presence. But God, in His grace, determined to restore His image in mankind and display His glory to the ends of the earth, and from Genesis to Revelation He called different people at different times for that mission. Asks your participants to find the answers in the passages on the left and write them down in these 2 columns. Here we will do it together. Genesis chapter 12, from 1 to 3, who did God call? Abram. How far was God's vision for Abram? All people. Exodus chapter 19, verses 5 and 6, who did God call? Israel. How far was God's vision for Israel? All nations. Psalm chapter 67, who did God call? Israel. How far was God's vision for Israel? All nations. Isaiah chapter 49, verses 5 to 6, who did God call? Jesus, in prophecy. How far was God's vision for Jesus? All the earth. Now let's look at the New Testament passages. Matthew chapter 28, from 18 to 20, who did God call? The disciples. How far was God's vision for the disciples? All nations. Acts 1, verse 8, who did God call? The disciples. How far was God's vision for the disciples? All the earth. 2 Corinthians 5, from 18 to 20, who did God call? His church. How far is God's vision for the church? All the earth. In Revelation chapter 7, verses 9 to 10, who did God call? The multitude. How far was God's vision for the multitude? Every nation, tribe, people, and languages. We can see that God's big vision is global. From Genesis to Revelation He reveals that He wants to save all nations. God in His plan to restore His image and display His glory, from Genesis to Revelation called different people at different times for that mission. Now God is calling His church. He is calling you to go and restore His image in people through Jesus and display His glory to the ends of the earth. You are part of God's big vision. His vision for you is big. He wants to use you in the nations for His glory. A church that grows and multiplies moves within God's big global vision, to all nations. God bless you as you train yourself in this lesson to train others who train others. See you in the next video of lesson number 3, Big Vision, it's local.